I'm coming back to this. Yes. Thank you. Fatma, welcome. Okay, so let's go quickly. Like I said, we are all aware, climate change is an emergency issue. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, released a new report, and which brings together the most recent advances in climate change, climate science, to outline the current state of climate change. So this one, we are already seeing the impacts or effects of human-induced climate change around the globe. It is therefore important that we, as major group and stakeholders, have secure time to participate in this meeting or this section. Is very important. The session is for capacity building and information. It will allow participants to discuss on the latest IPCC report, the political implication, and the link from COP26 to UNEA 5.2. It is very important because we'll discuss the challenges related to climate change, and also there are the two experts with us to report from the latest IPCC report for us. And for the participant, what initiatives might be important to highlight and in this session. So it is what we want to do in our session. The session will be moderated by myself, Djatougbe Aziaka. I'm from Togo. I am the president of organization. This is Association Welfare, but now I'm the co-facilitator of NGO Major group of UNEP, and I will ensure interactive participation and the discussion throughout the section. The working language is English. So I'm very happy to restart the section, but before I will give the floor to our experts to report from the IPCC report. We have with us His Highness the Prince from Saudi Arabia, Professor Pr.Moteb bin Fahad Al Saud. He is the chairman of the Saudi Association for Environment and Combat Desertification. He's currently with us now with his team, and I would like to give him the floor for the welcoming speech, and then we start the section. Thank you. You have the floor, His Highness.
Thank you very much. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السيدات والسادة الحضور الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بداية أعبر عن خالص شكري وتقديري بالأصالة عن نفسي وبالنيابة عن جمعية البيئة ومكافحة الصحراء السعودية لمنظمي هذه الجلسة الرفيعة المستوى، ممثلة ببرنامج الأمم المتحدة للبيئة يونيب، وأخص بالذكر رئيس الجلسة وكذلك المتحدثين والحضور الكرام للمشاركة في إثراء ونقاش الأفكار والأطروحات الخاصة بالبيئة. أننا في المملكة العربية السعودية نفخر بما قدمته لنا قيادتنا الحكيمة من دعم كبير بما يخص البيئة، حيث تم إنشاء عدد كبير من الجمعيات والروابط البيئية التي تدعم توجه الدولة أعزها الله، ومن ذلك الدعم الكبير من قيادتنا إنشاء محميات ملكية بما يعادل 14% من مساحة المملكة، ساهمت بشكل سريع بإعادة الغطاء النباتي، ومما نفخر به نحن أصدقاء البيئة الإنجازات الوطنية العملاقة، ومنها إنشاء مراكز وطنية متخصصة للبيئة وإنشاء قوات خاصة للأمن البيئي. وبهذه المناسبة وباسم جميع المتطوعين والمهتمين وأصدقاء البيئة بالمملكة أقدم الشكر لمولاي خادم الحرمين الشريفين الملك سلمان بن عبد العزيز وسمو ولي العهد الأمير محمد بن سلمان حفظهم الله على الدعم السخي للمناشط البيئية في وطننا الغالي. وفي تصريح سابق لمولاي خادم الحرمين الشريفين حفظه الله لوكالة الأنباء السعودية، أكد وخلال رئاسة المملكة لمجموعة ال20 أن المملكة برئاستها للمجموعة شجعت إطار الاقتصاد الدائري للكربون الذي يمكن من خلاله إدارة الانبعاثات بنحو شامل ومتكامل بهدف تخفيف حدة آثار التحديات المناخية وجعل أنظمة الطاقة أنظف وأكثر استدامة. وفي تصريح سابق لوكالة الأنباء السعودية أكد سمو ولي العهد حفظه الله أن المملكة والمنطقة تواجهان الكثير من التحديات البيئية مثل التصحر، الأمر الذي يشكل تهديدا اقتصاديا للمنطقة، حيث يقدر أن 13 مليار دولار تستنزف من العواصف الرملية في المنطقة كل سنة، كما أن تلوث الهواء من غازات الاحتباس الحراري يقدر أنه قلص متوسط عمر المواطنين بمعدل 1.5 سنة. وذكر سموه لوكالة الأنباء السعودية: سنعمل من خلال مبادرة السعودية الخضراء على رفع الغطاء النباتي وتقليل انبعاثات الكربون ومكافحة التلوث وتدهور الأراضي والحفاظ على الحياة البحرية. كما أعلن سموه ولي العهد حفظه الله عن مبادرة السعودية الخضراء ومبادرة الشرق الأوسط الأخضر، اللتان ترسمان توجه المملكة والمنطقة في حماية الأرض والطبيعة ووضعها في خارطة طريق ذات معالم واضحة وطموحة وتستسهمان بشكل فاعل في تحقيق المستهدفات العالمية. وذكر سمو ولي العهد حفظه الله أن مبادرتي السعودية الخضراء والشرق الأوسط الخضراء ستتضمن عددا من المبادرات الطموحة، من أبرزها زراعة 10 مليار شجرة داخل المملكة العربية السعودية خلال العقود القادمة، ما يعادل إعادة تأهيل حوالي 40 مليون هكتار من الأراضي المتدهورة، الأمر الذي سيؤدي إلى زيادة في المساحة المغطاة بالأشجار الحالية إلى 12 ضعفاً. وتمثل إسهام المملكة بأكثر من 4% في تحقيق مستهدفات المبادرات العالمية للحد من تدهور الأراضي والمؤن الفطرية، و1% من المستهدف العالمي لزراعة تريليون شجرة. وكذلك ذكر السمو ولي العهد حفظه الله أنه سيعمل على رفع نسبة المناطق المحمية إلى أكثر من 30% من مساحة أراضيها التي تقدر ب600,000 كيلو متر مربع، لتتجاوز المستهدف العالمي الحالي بحماية 17% من أراضي كل دولة، إضافة إلى عدد من المبادرات لحماية البيئة البحرية والساحلية. ختاما أكرر شكري وتقديري لكم جميعا، وأرجو من الله التوفيق والنجاح لجلسة المؤتمر، وشكرا.
Okay, we here have a translation. Shall I translate the speech?
Sure. Sure. You have 3 minutes to translate for us.
In the name of God.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. In the name of God, the most gracious, in the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, ladies and gentlemen, honorable audiences, peace, mercy, and blessing of God upon you. First of all, I'd like to express my sincere thanks and appreciation on my own behalf and on behalf of the Saudi Environment and Combat Desertification Society to the organizers of this high-level session presented by the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, especially the chair of the session, as well as the speakers and distinguished attendees for participating in enriching and discussing ideas and special proposals for the environment. We in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia are proud of the great support provided by our wise leadership with regard to the environment, as a large number of environmental associations and associations were established that support the direction of the state. And from that great support from our leadership, the establishment of royal reserves equivalent to 14% of the area of the kingdom contributed in the very rapid revegetation. Among the friends of the environment are proud of the giant national achievement, including the establishment of specialized national centers for the environment and the establishment of special forces for environment security. On this occasion, and on behalf of all volunteers, interested people, and friends of the environment in the kingdom, I extend my thanks to the custodian of the Holy Mosque, King Salman bin Abdul Aziz, and His Highness the Crown Prince, Prince Mohammed bin Salman. May God preserve them for the generous support of environment activities in our dear homeland. In a previous statement to the custodian of the Holy Mosque, may God protect him, the Saudi press agency confirmed during the kingdom's presidency of the group of 20 that the kingdom under its presidency of the group encouraged the framework of the circular carbon economy, through which emissions can be managed in a comprehensive and integrated manner with the aim and mitigation the effects of climate challenges and making energy system cleaner and more sustainably. And in a previous statement to the Saudi press agency, His Highness the Crown Prince, may God protect him, affirmed that the kingdom and the region face many environmental challenges, such as desertification, which contributes an economic threat to the region, as it is estimated that $13 billion are drained from sandstorms in the region every year, and air pollution from greenhouse gases is estimated to have reduced the average lifespan of citizens by an average of 1.5 years. His Highness told the Saudi press agency, we will work to go through the Green Saudi initiative to raise vegetation cover, reduce carbon emission, combat pollution and land degradation, and preserve marine life. His Highness the Crown Prince, may God protect him, also announced the Green Saudi initiative and the Green Middle East initiative, which chart the direction in the kingdom and the region in the protecting the land and nature and placing it on a roadmap with a clear and ambitious landmarks that will be effective in achieving global goals. His Highness the Crown Prince, may God protect him, stated that the Green Saudi Arabia and the Green Middle East initiatives will include a number of ambitious initiatives, most notably the planting of 10 billion trees inside the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia during the coming decades, which is equivalent to rehabilitation of 40 million hectares of degraded lands, which lead to an increase in the area covered by current trees to 12 times. And the Kingdom's contribution represents more than 4% in achieving the goals of the global initiative to reduce land degradation and wild habitats, and 1% of the global target for planting 1 trillion trees. We will work to raise the percentage of protected areas to more than 30% of its land area, which is estimated 600,000 square kilometers, exceeding the current global target of protection 70% of each country lands, in addition to a number of initiatives to protect the marine and coastal environment. In conclusion, I will reiterate my thanks and appreciation to all of you, and I wish God success for the conference session. Thank you.
Thank you, His Highness. Please, we like you share the translation with us, the translation in English translation test with us of his speech. You can send to me by email.
Immediately, I send it to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you a lot. So we have the welcoming speech from His Highness. Once again, I'm very excited you join us in this special session, and I know you have done many things on nature for climate, and your experience to share with us is very important. We'll come back to the discussion section later if you have some of the things to share again with us. So we'll move on and continue the section. Thank you. Carmen is joining us. Carmen, welcome. So we continue, and now I will give the floor to our first guest to report from latest IPCC report. I give the floor to Mr. Ajay Ka. Sorry if I pronounce not so well the name. Sorry, you correct me after. So he is the director coordinator movement for advancing understanding on sustainability and mutuality, a pan-Indian network for climate and environmental justice. He has been working following climate change policy and practices and international negotiation for over a decade. So I give the floor to our guest for the first part of the report of IPCC. Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. My greetings and salam to His Highness, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and to other colleagues. I would start with a disclaimer that I am neither an expert nor a guest. Don't make me a guest. We are colleagues and we work together. So let me have that pleasure of addressing all of you by saying colleagues. I have been asked by Madam Moderator to talk about the recent IPCC report and its main findings. On 9th of August, IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, released its 6th report. This is first part of the 6th report, which is called Working Group 1. And this mainly deals with the physical science basis of climate change or climate crisis, as we say this. This is sort of deals with what is behind the climate change, and other 2 reports are likely to follow by early next year. This is in fact a 4,000-page report done by 234 scientists belonging to 66 countries, which have reviewed more than 14,000 peer-reviewed articles. And yeah, this report has a stark warning for us, all of us. United Nations Secretary General called it the Red Code report. There have been several people calling it clarion call and whatnot. In terms of the content, there is not much that has changed, but this report has brought more scientific consensus and certainty on the reasons of the climate change and also our climate future. But why this report is important? Because while we might not be the first generation to learn about climate change and climate crisis, but definitely we are the last generation to be able to solve this problem. And I think this is the best time to mobilize governments, people's movement towards this. And this is the last chance. If we lose it, the future is very dark. This also, if IPCC reports have any future, any influence on the climate change crisis and climate change negotiations, this might as well be the last IPCC report to have been published just in time to make some influence in the COP26. And we hope that it makes a lot of influence in the COP26 and its outcomes. In terms of messages, there are 5-6 important messages from the report. The first message is that definitely it's because of human intervention or anthropogenic reasons, as they call it. Climate change is happening. It's unprecedented, and it is happening at a more rapid scale in all the regions. And it's already affecting all the regions through extreme climate events, etc. So this brings more scientific consensus on the attribution of human activities to climate change. That is not so bad a news because we had been already knowing this all along. But the bad news is the second message, that in all probability, we have lost our war to 1.5 degrees target of the Paris Agreement. Why I say this? Because in all the 5 scenarios that this report discusses, which it calls shared socio-economic pathways, we are likely to breach 1.5 degrees target. And despite our best efforts, there are so many conditions that if we achieve net zero by 2050, net zero emissions by 2050, if we have a huge shift to sustainable development rather than pure economic development, if investments are high in health and education, and if there are deep transformation in society and economy, despite these highest efforts, we will be breaching 1.5 degrees target. By when? By 2030s. You might remember that there was a report by IPCC, a special report on 1.5 degrees Celsius in 2018, which said that we are likely to breach 1.5 degrees target by 2040s. So this report has advanced that target by a decade. So now, in all probability, we are likely to breach this target by 2030. And with the best of the efforts continuing, we might be able to come back to temperature rise of 1.6 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. There was another report by World Meteorological Organization last year that said that even despite the best of efforts, there are chances that we might breach 1.5 degrees target at least for a year by 2025. So you can understand how stark is the warning. And this is the most optimistic scenario message that I'm discussing. There are more worse scenarios, and in the worst scenario, they project that the rise in temperature by the end of the century will be 4.4 degrees Celsius as compared to the pre-industrial times. So one can understand that how stark the message is. Besides putting more scientific consensus behind the reason and drivers of the climate change, this report also talks about climate futures. And as I said, that this report says that in the climate extremes are likely to happen in all the regions in the coming year, increasing in frequency, scope, and intensity. And the climate extremes they have highlighted is heat waves, extreme precipitation or heavy rainfalls, drought or cyclones. And in terms of frequency, they say that once in a decade heat wave might occur twice a decade, and it might be more intense. But the only good news from the report is that it's still possible to achieve 1.5 degrees target, maybe with a breach of few years, but with the conditions that I mentioned earlier. Net zero emission by 2050, huge shift to sustainable development goals rather than pure economic growth, heavy investment in education and health, and decarbonization of energy industry. And it's technically and feasibly possible. Decarbonizing energy industry will only cost 2.5% of the global GDP every year. So that's within the reach. But the main problem behind not going towards that deep decarbonization of energy industry is because of the profits. For the last 70 years, we have had huge investment in the fossil fuel industry, and fossil fuel companies are unlikely to divest from that unless extreme measures are taken. So that's about the report, but I would highlight a couple of reservations that we have from the report. One is that it blames entire humanity for the climate crisis. And entire humanity, many of us don't think should be should be blamed, because it's just 1% of the richest population that emits twice emissions as poorest of the 50% population in the world. So we can understand the inequality in carbon emissions, and based on that inequality, it would be hugely unfair to blame entire humanity. And yesterday I was seeing that while in the introduction to the question of what is the biggest impediment in climate and environmental action, many people had said that it's population. But I want to remind you that it's a myth. Population is increasing mainly in the poor countries and middle income countries. And if you look at it, poorest 50% of the population contributing to less than half of the emissions that 1% of the richest population contributes. Even if you increase the population by 2 billion, 3 billion in the poorest of the countries, not much of the resources will go to them. What I mean to say that while population growth is definitely a factor in resource depletion, but they are not the most and only important cause in the climate crisis or resource depletion. So
the time.
Yeah, just 1 minute to wind it up. IPCC reports, we are also have reservation because it promotes unproven and contentious technologies like bioenergy and bioenergy with carbon capture storage, which I think brings the problems which comes with biofuels and carbon capture and storage. And biofuels, you understand, it requires half of the total agricultural land of the world, which is around 5 billion hectares, to plant it with bioenergy crops, which is impossible. We see what are the impacts of bioenergy plantation in the world already.
Thank you, Ajay. I think we will come back on this during the discussion with the participants. Because of the time also, I want to keep the time. I want to go straight to Joan Yuga from Reaction Climatica. He's the project coordinator, and he is the second guest for us to report from the IPCC report. You have the floor, Joan.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I would like to confirm that you can hear me.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfectly.
I prepared a small presentation, but the function is not ready. I cannot share it, so I will just talk about it.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, His Royal Highness, friends, colleagues. So I will try to not repeat the things that Ajay already covered, but there are a couple of things to mention about the new IPCC report. So these reports, they are published regularly, and these reports come from 3 different work groups. And this one, the already published part of the 6th assessment report, comes from the physical basis of climate change. There will be 2 more parts to this report, one dedicated to the impacts and the adaptation and vulnerability, and one dedicated to mitigation. They will be published sometime next year. So this report in particular was prepared by something over 200 scientists from 60 countries. They review about 14,000 different papers, and they came with these conclusions. So the new assessment report is it has some. It don't really have so many new things. As I said, a lot of this is already well known, but there are some things that it's important to mention. One thing that really caught my attention was the language. The summary for policymakers, it's about 40 pages long document. It uses the term very likely about 42 times. Very likely, it's really rare to see that term used so often in a scientific document. Very likely means over 90% certainty. The summary for policymakers says, and I'm quoting, it's unequivocal that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean, and land. That kind of language can only come from really high certainty, and that's rare in scientific papers. So one of the things that the new IPCC report says is climate change is widespread, rapid, it's intensifying, and it's on us. There is no way of escaping that. It's on us. And one of the ways in which this has been determined is that now this report gets simulated scenarios in which only natural factors move the carbon emissions. And you can compare it with the observed scenarios, which include our influence in the carbon emissions and, of course, our influence in the climate. And more certainty to that, we are provoking an important change in the climate. So one of the things that this report says, in 2018, the IPCC published a special report comparing the 1.5 degree of increase from pre-industrial conditions and the 2 degrees increase in global temperature from pre-industrial conditions. And this report from 2018 says that the difference in the effects over the climate system will be outstanding. We have to try to keep it to 1.5 degrees. And one of the things that this report says, as I already said, is that it will be very difficult to keep this 1.5 degrees. Even in the most optimistic of the scenarios, we will get to that increase, 1.5 degrees, sometime around 2040. And in the most optimistic of the scenarios, we will then start to get a slow but constant decline in the global temperatures. So the 1.5 degrees goal is on life support. There are other things interesting in the report. One is that it's less conservative than the previous reports on rise in sea level. This one states clearly that no matter what we do, we are far past the point where at least we will have half a meter of sea level increase, even in the most optimistic scenarios, and we can have as much as 2 or even 5 meters of sea level rise in the most pessimistic scenarios. Another thing is that we have better understanding of many of the scientific factors. I mean, the understanding is improving and the report reflects it. This report makes a lot of emphasis in methane emissions. Methane emissions, the report says that we already had 1.1 degrees Celsius of heating, and 0.3 of these 1.1 degrees come from methane emissions. This is kind of good news because we have relatively good chances of reduced methane emissions, mainly the ones that come from oil, gas, and carbon mining, with minor economical impacts. So probably it's one of the places where we can intervene. But in a wider scope, I mean, that could cover the IPCC report. In a wider scope, I would like to talk about the general perspective of climate change. And there is a couple of things that I think we should mention. One is that apparently, at least apparently, the peak in the oil consumption is already past. You can check many sources. One of them is that in 2020, the BP, the British Petroleum, commissioned a carbon brief. It's something that they commission from time to time, so they can check the projections on the oil consumption in the market in the future. And their projection says, the British Petroleum projection says that 2019 was the peak. So COVID-19 plummeted the oil consumption, and even though it is recovering, according to their own projections, there is no way they can get to the 2019 levels again. So there is only down for petroleum at this point. And I think that it's important to mention the place where some climate plans from some important countries are. Earlier this year, as part of the efforts to recover the US economy, the Biden administration in the US presented a plan that includes a lot of climate policies about green jobs and infrastructure. And even though organizations like the Sunrise Movement protested against the plan, it was the kind of ambitious plan that you need from a country like the United States. But the political climate in the United States makes really difficult for Biden, who has a razor-thin majority, to really pass this plan. The plan established to cut greenhouse gases from the US by half by 2030, and established net zero emissions by 2050. It's the kind of commitment that we need, but politically it's impossible. It's dead on arrival. Still, probably, hopefully, some parts of the plan will be passed and financed. There is some things to this plan. One of them is that to achieve these net zero emissions, it includes capture technologies that still does not exist. But the plan says, well, we will develop it, we will finance the development of these carbon capture technologies for that deadline. Still, I mean, in that political climate, it's a step in the right direction. There is also interesting the European plan. Europe has already established goals. They have to reduce 55% of their emissions for 2030, and they have to get to net zero by 2050. And that goals were already adopted, but they don't have really a plan. So in July, they presented different plans to try to achieve this goal. There are three things that I found really interesting. One is that they established some progressive legislation on motor vehicles that will effectively ban any gas and diesel car vehicles being sold in the European Union by 2035. And that's big. That will change the market. Other interesting thing is that establish a tax for jet fuel, which probably will kill some of the low-cost airlines in Europe, but it's still kind of important. It will have a big impact in their goals. But I think that the most interesting part of this European plan, and one of the more difficult parts, is that establish some sort of carbon border tariff, which I mean is the plan established that it eventually will be a cost for producing carbon while producing any goods. And they established that if you produce a good in a country with weaker legislation that doesn't have this kind of tariffs on carbon, and you try to export it to the European Union, you will have to pay a tax, you will have to pay a tariff. This will probably be really contested by international trade blocs, by international trade courts, and even inside the European Union by lobbies and countries that really depend on some income related to oil or gas. But I mean, it will be really difficult to pass as it is, but it's still the intention at this moment in the Union. And finally, another interesting thing is that since if you talked about 7 or 8 years ago, some other countries, particularly China, didn't have any goal about reducing their emissions. I mean, the economy was more important. And since last year, China already put a peak, a date on the peak of their oil consumption and of their carbon emissions. They say that they will peak by 2030, and they will start reducing the emissions from there. And they expect to be carbon neutral for 2060. And this not only has been maintained by the administration, But just in August, early in August, early last month, the Politburo established some sort of some sort of guide on how these policies will be implemented. Unfortunately, there is much less analysis because the document is not really public, but there are press releases about how they are keeping their mind in the game. So what we have to, yeah, just finally, what we have to do.
That's 1 minute.
All right, thank you. So COP26 is already near us. It will be in November. We don't expect really that important changes in COP26, but what we have to do as advocates, as activists, is one, keep an eye on the NDCs. The NDCs are the national determined the national determined commitments, the national voluntary commitments. So we have to keep an eye on the NDCs of our countries. We have to follow it. We have to follow the negotiation. It's very important. And one thing in which me and my colleagues are kind of, I don't know if skeptical, but nature-based solutions are a great idea, but it could be really easily hijacked and become some sort of greenwashing. So we need wide policy interventions. We need ambition. Nature-based solutions will be part of the solution probably, but we have to be careful not to let the political actors to oversell it. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you, Ryan. You explained a lot, and I thank you both, AJ and you, for reporting from the latest IPCC report. And it is clear that there is an emergency. We have to act. We are at the time of action, not only just to talk. So I open the floor now to the audience, the participants, those who have the questions, who want to react on the presentations. You have the floor. You can, those who cannot, you can raise your hand and I give you the floor. You express yourself. We exchange. It is a debate. We will exchange. Which now we have the problem. We see all the things we hear now during the beginning of this session. Ajay, express, explain. Joanne also talk about this report. As now the big question is, what will be the initiatives? The true initiative who might be really important to fight against climate change, to this crisis, who is really impacting the people in our different countries. Because what I have in my country, as like Togo, is different from a country like India, like America, like Europe. So together, what concretely action we have to put together so that we can face this crisis? Because you have to act now, like AJ said. You have the floor. Yes, I come back to the team of His Highness, the Prince. You have the floor if you want to express yourself. You have the floor. Yes? I don't hear you. We cannot hear you.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Now is okay.
Yeah, okay. I'd like to thank the presenters for their speech from the IPCC, and they focus on many points, actually, especially the increase of population and so on, and this is just a myth. I understand that IPCC, they launched their 5th report 2019 at Madrid, and this one is the 6th report, which will be presented at Glasgow after 2 months. And it has been graded by the French government. What I want to say that the 1.5 increase in the climate change there are a lot of parameters including in this. And we know that the transport sector is playing a big role in this. And we know that the electricity cars is coming, and it will help a lot to decrease this point. But nobody is focusing on the emissions that come from the data collection. We know that the data is increasing exponentially every year. And this is the raw material for the, what you call it, the industrial artificial intelligence. And when they save the data, they save it in the receivers and so on. And now we come to the clouds saving. So the emissions of data is contributing more than 10%. So there is a tool that will help to decrease the increase of huge data that is reserved in the receivers in order to decrease the climate change emissions. This point, I'm not aware if the IPCC is taking care about this phenomena. So maybe they can elaborate on this. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution. I go back to our guest, Ajay. Do you have anything to say about his intervention?
There is one more question, Djatougbe, if you can take it also. Musa is raising.
Yes, Musa. Yes, I give you the floor, Musa, and then we can go. Musa, are you here? Do you hearing me?
Hello.
Hi, now it's okay, it's fine.
Hello.
You have the floor, Musa.
Okay, thank you very much, Lady Aziaka.
Thank
And
you.
I thank our guests, our honorable ambassadors, and also I thank also my fellow colleagues who are online. My question is, or my contribution is to Nature for Climate is that we have a lot of challenges. One is that we're witnessing that the least developed countries, they're now coming up to see that they also contribute to polluting the climate. Whereas in the beginning, as you remember, during the Paris Agreement, we had big countries, we had developed countries who were majoring in polluting the climate. Now, this went to also to countries like our friends from US, they withdrew, and now they have come back. But now what we're witnessing is that the least developed countries, I will talk of my country, like Tanzania, also it is now contributing vigorously in polluting the climate. And nothing is being done to address the issue of polluting the climate. We are seeing more and more industries coming up in my country. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, no, because people are getting employed. But the issue is, what about the climate issue? Now, my question is, is there any solution through UNEP, through IPCC, that they have resolved at the global perspective point of view that can limit the least developed countries, the developed countries, to see that we adhere to the issue of controlling climate change? This is becoming a little bit out of hand, that each country is coming up because they want to address the issue of employment. It's a political will. Each country wants to see that they employ their citizens. And by employing the citizens, they want to see that they have more industries in their national level. These industries, they vary. Other industries produce more, they pollute the atmosphere than expected. But there's no one, if you come up, for example, for us, we are addressing from NGO perspective point of view, you are silenced. You are silenced completely. If you raise your finger and point out that, look here, if such a factory is polluting the environment, you are silenced. And no one is willing to protect you. Neither of any of our stakeholders is willing to raise a hand and say, look here, this person you are arresting, or this person you are closing his or her NGO is saying a point. No one is willing to do that. No one is willing to do that. We don't have protection. Remember, it's a national issue. National issues vary from country to country. Our country, Tanzania, would be focused on maybe employment. They're saying our people are not employed. You see? So the best they can do is have very many industries polluting the climate change. But what is IPCC coming up with a concrete resolution that they can address to UNEP or UNEA, so that we can come up with a concrete solution that can address the environment adaptation or mitigation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Musa, for your contribution and the question at the end. Our guests, they are with us, but I'll give also the floor to Carmen, who is asking for the floor to say something. Carmen, you have the floor, and then we'll come back to our guests.
Thank you, Djatougbe. I think it's important to highlight that the IPCC reports are only scientists giving political recommendations to the world leaders. I think we have to understand that. So no major solutions are going to come from the IPCC report. Is the people, the people that are involved, that are pressuring for public policies that are going to be able to change that. And we have to understand what the local impacts are and what the global impacts are. So it's interesting what the IPCC report says, but we have to, every one of us has to look at our specific scenario. So I think that's kind of like one of our duties. The other thing is that we need strong political will. We talk about climate change more and more every day, but there isn't political will. We need that the governments take a stand and really commit to change the things, to regulate these industries that are damaging climate and that are damaging the ecosystems. And I think we have to understand that. We know that big companies are doing their share on the problem, but we also need governments to understand and to put the regulations needed so this doesn't happen. And one of the shames was, as Johan was mentioning, was carbon tax, for example. But we as civil society have to be creative. We need to think outside of the box, and we need to start seeing all these problems from the other perspective. So right now, what we want is conclusions from this working table that can bring that perspective of what can we do and what we're pressuring for and what we expect governments to do. I think that's kind of like our task right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. Yes, this is our big task. And there is one question in the chat box. Can you please comment more on the role of education in combating climate change? There is another one who is saying, which countries are still prone to the effect of climate change in our sub-region West Africa? How is IPCC helping civil society organizations to help change the trajectory? There is one, the first one was also, what has changed since the launch of the previous 2014 IPCC report? So these questions, I throw them to our guests. You have the floor. I start with AJ.
Last questions first I will take. It's a very interesting question, that what has changed since the last report of the IPCC. You have mentioned 2018, that was a special report on 1.5 degrees Celsius. Not much, I would say. Unfortunately, not much. What is happening right now, that none of the rich countries have given NDCs, nationally determined contributions, that are compliant with 2 degrees Celsius, leave alone 1.5 degrees Celsius. So there is huge deficit as far as political will of the countries is concerned. As for which of the countries are vulnerable, there is a climate risk index which is brought up every year. So you just go to Google and see the climate risk index 2020, you will see your country figured in that, if your country is a highly vulnerable country. Thanks Carbon also for highlighting that IPCC is an intergovernmental body and its report are politically negotiated. That also answers the question that Johan raised in the beginning, that 42 times in 42 pages, it's written very likely. What actually happens is, in the negotiations, countries force scientists to write conservative and modest language rather than alarmist language. So even with the high confidence, at times in the report you will see very likely rather than extremely likely. As far as energy footprint of data is concerned, it's significant, it's rising exponentially, but it's even till now, it's very insignificant in relation to environmental footprint of energy or transport or agriculture, etc., etc. So I think let's be very clear that technological solutions and market-based solutions in terms of carbon pricing and carbon market is not taking us too far. It's not going to succeed, and we have till now empirical evidences of how much carbon emission carbon markets have been able to reduce. So as civil society organizations and people's movement and major groups, I would say that our emphasis should be on resisting false solutions and promoting genuine solutions, which is related to people's lives and considers people's lives and their circumstances. And nature-based solution can be one of the great ideas. Nature-based solution is always better than engineered solutions. But again, till now, we don't have a standard definition of what is nature action, right? What is nature action? UNEP's theme and idea of nature action for climate, food, health, job, economic recovery is good, but we need to standardize those definitions and have principles which are based on intergenerationality, which are based on polluter pays principles, which are based on participation, which are based on informed prior consent of indigenous people and frontline communities who are facing the worst impact of climate crisis. If we don't do that, if we don't have very clear definition and principles which incorporate safeguard for the people against corporations or industrial capitalism, I would say it's very likely that nature action will be hijacked by a group of people who are promoting nature-based solutions. And nature-based solutions experience we have had in the form of climate smart agriculture, or in the form of RED Plus program, or in the form of plantation program in Southeast Asia, and many other countries in Latin America also, and we are very well aware of what is happening in that. So and to come to local solutions is good, but there need to be a global solution, because even if we start planting all the trees and stop all the electricities at a particular place or a country or a region, the problem is not going to be solved. As far as education, my last point about education. We
have only 9 minutes remaining, so I want to give also a floor to Joan
just
before we
30 seconds on education. Till now, our environmental education and climate change education is completely focused on individual behavior, which is good. One should improve its individual behavior, but that is not enough solution. We need political solutions, and we should raise a voice for that. Thanks.
We need political solution. That's why you are here, to push the agenda. Joan, if you have something quickly to add, because we are running, I have to give the floor back to Fatima. She's waiting for us. And we just have 9 minutes. Please be short.
Thank you. I think that Jay covered very good all the questions. There is a couple of things that I think that there are different in these reports. I mean, as all the other report is building in the certainty and the science, but it's saying the same things. We are not doing enough. We have to do more, but we still can change the tide. We still can stop the worst effects of climate change. Part of it will hit us, but we still have some chance. And I don't think that I have anything else to add. Ajay covered really well all the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you for the time you give us. So I come back because we have one point of our agenda remaining. I want to give the floor to Fatima Futan. She's the member of our cluster, Nature for Climate. So she will update on our cluster, what we are looking for. That's why we are here. Fatima, you have the floor.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to introduce myself, Fatima Futan. As mentioned by my colleague, I'm a member of the cluster. As well, I am a regional facilitator of West Asia for UNEP. Also, I'm a member of Bahrain Women Association for Human Development. I'm leading environmental citizenship program there. And also, I would like to thank everybody who joined us today in this session. And a special thank you for His Highness Pr.Moteb bin Fahad Al Saud. Thank you for joining us. We always do believe that we cannot reach the promise or the progression that we aim at unless we collaborate together. And in this session, we realized that even if it's a difficult situation that we are living today in the climate that is impressing everybody, whether people will acknowledge it or not, the impact of climate change will affect everybody. So through the cluster that we are working on today, we try to change that and to initiate the change. And the climate cluster, or Nature for Climate, we have initiated a steering committee. Also, we opened the floor for all accredited NGO to join us. What we have done, I'll share the screen. One of our colleagues, Ayman, maybe you saw him in the welcoming speech, he created this Google document or Google Drive. We segmented our work to the calendar, the meetings that we have. We have usually online meetings, and we continue the discussion on our WhatsApp group. The concept paper, I will come to the concept paper at a later stage, and the meeting notes. The member, as I mentioned, we open the floor to any interested NGO who have the capacity, who have the experience that can be an additional benefit to us within this cluster, and the resources that we refer to while we are drafting the concept paper. So what is let's say, what the structured concept paper will look like? We will have the introduction of nature for climate, why there is an importance to have a dedicated cluster for climate. We will cover this in the concept paper. Then we thought it is really important for us to focus on the efforts and achievement of major groups on the nature for climate. I'm sure that from different regions around the world has did or achieved good, let's say, things in the nature for a climate section. So we want to emphasize on the effort that has been done so far in this field. And at the end of the concept paper, we will be working on the priority issues, what we want to focus on, how we can move forward. So in this section also, we will be also looking for the agreements that will come up from the COP26, the important priorities that will be focusing on COP. I think this will add value as well to the concept paper. This is in a nutshell what we are doing so far. And we always, we will take the opportunity of having you all among us here today to open the floor to any interested NGO who would like to join us by contacting either me or my colleague or Ayman. We even will add it on the house space, the contact details. So you feel free to contact us, and you are most welcome to join us within the cluster. And based on that, we will be moving forward to draft the concept paper. That's it from my side. Thank you all.
Thank you, Fatma, my colleague in this cluster. So we will be open to collect ideas and to, like Carmen said, we are here to see how we can push the agenda. We have 3 minutes, so I will not go too much inside, but I just want to let something with you. You know, during this debate about climate change, one of our guests talked about NDCs, and what I noticed is that civil society engagement in NDCs at national levels are very weak. How can we push and be involved at national level so that the civil society actions can be highlighted? Yes, all the countries will give their NDCs to give how they want to, their ambition, their commitment. But in implementation of NDCs, the civil society also must be part of it. And we have to have a special programs for them to support their work on the ground. It is very important because all of us, we are in the same ship, and we have to go to find the way we can go together. So we have 2 minutes to end this section. I'll go back to our Highness if he has at least one word to say goodbye, and then we'll end this section. We just have 1 minute. It is time. So if you want to add something, just 1 minute. Thank you to join us, His Highness the Prince and his team. You have the floor. 1 minute. We have to end the section. Yes, you can go. You are very happy you are with us today. You have the floor. Just 1 minute. You have to end the section.
Okay. تقول انك تنهي السيشن يعني تقول لهم thank you for.
Okay, thank you very much. I am nice to meet you today and good meeting. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prince. And I'm inviting your organization to join to have accreditation to UNEP, a big part of our network of NDCs. Thank you.
Thank you. I highly appreciated. Yes.
Thank you. You are welcome. Thank you. We come at the end of this section. Thank you all to join us, and then we continue the discussion in the our workplace in the panel, and we have to go back to the plenary. And I hope my netoka did his job. I have to get back the note from this meeting. Musa, I have to get my notes from the meeting. Thank you. Carmen, thank you. Fatima, thank you. John, thank you.
Hello.
All of us.
Hello.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
باي 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 باي.
Thank you all.
تقول تشكرك يا سمو الأمير أنك أعطيت.
Okay. Carmen, you want to say something?
Oh, probably that on behalf of the major groups facilitating committee, we're very thankful for all the job done in this cluster. We still have another session, right? For this in the so please take that into account.
Can I come in also?
Yes,
Sure.
of course.
I hope the host will share with us the presentations because they have recorded. I've recorded something, but it's not that very good. But I think they will share with you, Madam Aziaka.
Thank you. I would like to have the recording, and then we have to present our section tomorrow in the plenary. So we have to work on it. You and Musa and me, you are the note taker, and you have to work on it and present our work to the plenary tomorrow.
Yes, great job.
Thank you for your support. Thank you, San, for helping me to get this section.
No worries.
Thank you for assistance.
I'll send you the recording.
Thank you.
So you can have it for the notes as well.
Great
job,
you.
Rolande. Great job.
With my pleasure.
I hope I was a good listener.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.